are here now talking about gender equality with a particular focus on women. I'm here with three individuals making great strides in their own particular areas, and we've got 30 minutes to talk about this extensive topic and try and fit it into 30 minutes to help you and everyone watching online understand how they can apply these lessons to their business. So let's get cracking, let's get straight into it. So Cindy, let's start with you. So in Thailand and now moving out across Southeast Asia, you're leading a campaign focused on gender-based violence. You could, obviously there'll be Thais in the room that are very familiar with your work. For people watching online and people maybe outside of Thailand, you could tell us how did the campaign start and where are we now?
Thank you. My hashtag, Don't Tell Me How to Dress, started in March of 2018 as a pushback against the victim blaming and victim shaming that often occurs in society when a woman is assaulted or harassed. There's usually the first question is, well, what were you wearing? And so that's the intent of my campaign, is to really create more awareness around the underlying factors that contribute to sexual harassment and assault. And through that, I started an exhibition called Social Power Exhibition Against Sexual Assault, in which we brought clothing worn by victims at the time of their assault to really showcase and see. So we have university student uniforms to clothes of a stay-at-home mother to a toddler's play suit, and to really let's talk about this. And so that campaign has been doing very well. It's actually gone to the Philippines. We had a similar exhibition in Singapore 2 months ago. And now I'm continuing my advocacy. We're taking it on university roadshows, continuing the conversation, and also seeing ways that we can spread the message with emphasis on education as well.
So what changes do you think the campaign's made so far already? What changes have you seen?
Well, it's definitely sparked a lot of conversation. Just the hashtag itself gets people going, what's going on? So that's a first step, because this entire issue of gender inequality, especially gender-based violence, it's very deeply rooted in historical, cultural norms, attitudes, and beliefs, especially here in Asia, where it's still a very patriarchal society, and women don't enjoy the same opportunities, in fact, the same status as men in many areas, and we are usually blamed for our own assault, and so that's where I'm trying to get more conversations going. It's doing really well. There are a lot of young people who are very interested. Universities have invited me to go and speak, high school students, so that's really inspiring for me, and it's showing me that there's a lot of work to be done in educating the future generation as well.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning work to be done. So yeah, we mentioned before, like victim blaming, still stigma obviously attached to victims, it's still a taboo subject. Mm-hmm. You mentioned things like there's still a pressure to settle out of court with regards to cases. So what problems do you see that are still there, and how can we, and the campaign, how can we maybe tackle those problems?
Well, just the general issue of gender inequality, especially in Asia, specifically in Asean, is like I said, it's deeply rooted in culture. And so this is not something that can happen overnight, but there are many positive steps that we can be doing as communities, as societies, as general public, as well as law enforcement and governments as well. If we make the Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is standalone goal for gender equality, but how do we then also cross-cut that gender equality to all of the SDGs as well? And so this is a combined effort from all levels of society. But the one target that I'm really, really passionate about is reducing gender-based violence, specifically violence against women and girls, because it is still shocking, the numbers that this is happening. I mean, according to a UN Women report in Asia and Pacific, as many as 1 in 2 women have experienced physical or sexual assault or violence from their intimate partner in the past 12 months. This is not okay, and there's a normalization, there's a tolerance of such violence that we really need to address, because it's not just impact on the individual herself, it impacts her family, it impacts her children, society, and there's an economic impact as well. Loss of productivity, employment, cost to Medicare, medical healthcare services as well. And so this is an issue that is very, very urgent, and I think we need to all address that.
Definitely. And talking about the men, I think JP and I would be we're on board already, but for male allies in the community, maybe focusing on Thailand, if there's a Thai gentleman who's outside of Bangkok who's maybe not on board with this subject at the moment, how can we make him into a male ally?
I think just we need to have more community outreach. We need to have education and explain what is gender equality. What does that mean? And still a sense of respect for basic human rights. And so that's where my focus is going towards next, is education, specifically for children and parents of children through comprehensive sexuality education. And I'm actually writing a series of children's books so Thai parents can use these as a tool to talk to their children about respect, consent. What does it mean to have happy, healthy relationships? Because if we don't educate the future generation, we're not going to have an equal future.
Yeah. So maybe focusing on the children, do you think maybe, playing devil's advocate, of course, that this generation's, the older generation's maybe gone, lost?
Oh, no. I definitely have hope. I definitely have hope for this generation, because it's this generation that needs to teach the next generation. And so I think there needs to be, like I said, it's a combined effort from all levels. It's not just for women's groups. It's not just for some NGOs who are worried about this, the problem of rape in the country. It is a societal issue. And so that's where I'm hoping that we can collaborate, whether it be finding solutions in ways that maybe haven't worked traditionally yet, and seeing how we can work together for this. Yeah.
Obviously, as a Westerner, one of the contradictions, we've mentioned this before, obviously with the hashtag "Don't Tell Me How to Dress," that's about asking men to not ask women, tell women how to dress. If we compare that to maybe these same men that are doing that are also turning a blind eye to the sex industry that's in Southeast Asia, to a Westerner, how that sort of cultural contradiction almost, how explain why do you think that exists? So we've got the sex industry that's across Asia, that's there, but also we're also asking men to not tell women how to dress.
It's an interesting contrast, isn't it? And that's something that I think comes from the fact that we don't really talk about it.
Yeah.
It's there, but nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to own it. Nobody also wants to talk about sexual and violence that happens with women and girls that's happening in the homes as well. And so it's definitely, I think, just bringing the subject out of the dark and into the light, and that's what I'm hoping to do with my campaign and using my platform to speak out against it. Let's empower women to get the justice that they deserve.
Definitely. And with regards to the campaign, so obviously don't tell me how to dress. Let's focus on dressing in the workplace. So is there a line in terms of, obviously we want to empower women to dress how they want in the workplace? Say you were a CEO.
Yes.
What guidelines would you put in place for your female employees?
I get this question asked a lot when people see my hashtag is "Don't Tell Me How to Dress." They think it's me inciting women to go out and dress however they want and incite men, it's two very different topics. If we're talking about dressing appropriately and professionally in the workplace, that's one issue. I'm a big advocate of dressing appropriately, giving respect to the institution, to the event, to your host, and being professional. I feel like it represents who you want to represent as a person. I have an issue, and that's the intent of my campaign, is to use how a woman was wearing as a justification for assaulting her. Two very different subjects here, apples and oranges. And so if a woman was dressed inappropriately or unprofessionally, that's a matter for her and her boss to discuss according to the code of conduct or employment outline guidelines that were previously agreed upon. But in my opinion, even if a woman was dressed inappropriately walking down the street or not wearing anything at all, you still have no right to assault her.
Definitely agree with that. So, I mean, talking about clothes, obviously, fantastic career in the fashion industry. How do you think your industry has evolved in your career and in recent times with regards to telling women how to dress or defining what beauty is? How do you think your industry's changed over the time? Is it now better at doing things like that with regards to, obviously, diversity of beauty standards and things like that?
I've been in the fashion industry and media industry 27 years now. throughout the time, I've been a consumer, and I've also been an active participant in the images and the media that you see. I've seen a lot of change. I believe that the fashion industry does get a bad rap sometimes about, creating unhealthy stereotypes or unrealistic beauty ideals, and I would have to agree with that in some areas. But I also, from what I see, is changing into becoming much more inclusive, much more diverse, much more of a platform for women to celebrate their unique beauty, and use it as a platform to empower and inspire other women. And I'm very excited to see that happening, especially in the age of social media now, how we can promote healthy and empowering ideals for women, and especially young girls as well, because that's very important.
Good stuff. So segueing from fashion to cosmetics, JP, do you think your industry, what role do you think your industry's had in defining beauty standards? Do you think they're in a good place at the moment?
Yeah, I think, I've been in the industry 30 years. So I've seen how it has evolved, and I would say that I'm very lucky to work for a very positive industry, which is not about selling products or just selling beauty products, cosmetics products. It goes beyond that. It has a social impact in the way it gives to people confidence, happiness, and it helps to have a better quality of life. And it's for everybody. It's, of course, you would say beauty is mainly for women, but we have more and more men actually coming to our industry. And I believe we do something which is very important socially speaking.
Definitely. So yeah, talking about that female empowerment and empowering your consumers, you're telling me you're doing some work reaching out to consumers, doing some work in Cambodia and that sort of thing with the Life Quality Center. So maybe tell me a bit more about that. How are you empowering your consumers beyond the products?
We have several projects, and one of them is to empower women in Asia. And Asia is a place where there's a lot of gaps, I would say. And we've just found this project in Cambodia, which is a very good cause, because it helps young women to get more education and to get more confidence and to go through leadership training. So this is something we are just starting this year. So that's one project. Another project is we have set up in Singapore, in our regional headquarters, what we call a Life Quality Center. So this is a place for people who have skin issues, and I mean by issues, problems which are very deep, like scars or problems of disease, and these people doesn't get the confidence to go out and to have a normal social life. And we have decided to set a non-profit service for these women who come to our office in Singapore, and they get the chance to do a special makeup so that they can regain confidence. Yep. So yeah, we try to empower women through different programs.
Definitely. So yeah, the Life Quality Center, I mean, like you mentioned there, genuine empowerment with makeup. Actually read a book preparing for our session that I thought I would never read in my life, about the history of makeup. And about how it's products that have been around since the Roman times in Japanese society, whitening products in particular, they've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So there are some women who maybe have darker skin tones. You might think that whitening products, they're suggesting that whiter women are more beautiful. We're talking about beauty standards. So how can we compare and contrast the Life Quality Center, which is genuine work, and the issues that some women have with whitening products? Do you think they both empower women?
Yeah, I think, confidence is coming from not only makeup, but a great skin everywhere. And I think women in Asia wants to have, like a glossy, let's say a very healthy look. And we provide products which give them, this kind of results. And it's a big seller in Asia, that's true. I think, as I said before, we try to provide more than that, services at the same time, and that's working pretty well. Yep. But one thing that I wanted to highlight is the fact that in the women empowerment, it's something which is very big for a Japanese company. I don't know if you noticed, but in the research of the gender gap index, you have in fact Japan, which is at the bottom, unfortunately. And Japanese companies, are not the best companies in history to get towards diversity, but they are trying hard to change it. In fact, what I have lived in the past 5 years, a total transformation in the Shiseido group towards, diversity, women empowerment. You can see the statistics here. This is for Japan only. In Japan, we have now 30% of women in the leaders' position, and we want to go to 40%. In Asia, however, we are at 65%. So I think for a Japanese company, it is not common. Many companies in Japan try to change that because this is important to go global and to acquire talent, to show our commitment to gender equality. We have made, I think, a lot of progress in this area.
And let's focus more on your employees. There might be some CEOs or senior people in the audience in their organizations. They want to increase the number of women at work. So how have you succeeded in bringing this number up?
Well, it must be a top priority for the management. When I took over Asia Pacific 4 years ago, in Singapore, I made it my commitment to promote local leaders, not only expats coming from Japan, and also women in the leadership top position. A good example is Thailand. Actually, we are sitting here at a great moment in the history of our company in Thailand because we have appointed for the first time in 4 decades a woman at the top of our Shiseido Thailand company, which is something which has never existed in the past. So now I'm quite lucky to have a very strong leadership team with a lot of strong ladies to lead our company. Maybe in Thailand I need a little bit more men now because the executive team is only ladies now. So I'm trying to find a balance. But overall, I'm very happy as a leader to have be able to do this transformation in the company.
Definitely. And then, obviously, segueing to Lynn there, cosmetic company, more associated with maybe women, providing women's products. Your business, energy, oil and gas, for some reason, more associated with regards to men working for them. How are you getting on in terms of the gender diversity at your business, and how are we bringing that number of women working for you up?
Well, we've been in this journey, especially for gender equality in Shell, for the last 20 years. So 20 years ago, we had 4% senior representation of women, and today where we're at globally is about slightly more than a quarter. And in the short term, we'll probably get to a third. I think what we've seen in the past 5 years is by no chance. So as an example, we have 45% women on our board of directors. Our chief financial officer is a female. We've done quite a few things, so maybe let me articulate. What we've realized is that it needs the top of the house to be committed. But commitment itself is not important. The top of the house has to be visible around that commitment. People have to see the action taking place. So the statistics that I've just mentioned are the examples. The other bit, which is a journey, and it's not as easy, is the education, the awareness, and the engagement all across, up and down in the organization. That takes time, and that explains the 20 years. So that's what we've realized as an organization.
And your job title, so we have one at Bloomberg. Obviously, yes. You are your version at Shell, but there might be some companies in the audience that don't have your job in their organization. So maybe tell us a bit more. What do you do? What do you do?
Okay. Well, a lot of people ask me that question, right? And they go like, seriously? Is that a real job? So it is a real job. What do I do? One of the areas, so let's talk about diversity. It is all about ensuring that we have a diverse workforce, because Shell is spread across 70-odd countries. And we need to reflect what our customers' needs and wants are. And you can only do that if you have a diverse organization that supports and represents the consumers. There are other things that we focus on other than gender. So we focus as well on nationalities. We want very much for our organization to be represented by the nationals, the local nationals that are in those countries that we operate. We as well, in more recent years, have been wanting to focus as well on people with disabilities. So making sure that we recruit more of diverse talent. Perhaps some of you may or may not have heard, also in the area of neurodiversity, people who may in the past be considered disabled, but now are considered to have special talents. Yeah? People with autistic spectrum, ADHD, areas in which in the future of work, these are important. The other part, inclusion, is probably the more fun bit of my job. With my background, as I mentioned to you, Mark, as a psychologist, it is about culture change. It is about mindset change. It's about behaviors. It's about organization effectiveness. Inclusion does not come when you have a diverse organization. In fact, the more diverse you are, the more divisive you have in terms of organization. So you need to have values that people can appreciate and identify with. And that is about purpose. Yeah, that part I cannot explain, but it is about how people feel when they come to work. So in a nutshell, what we do in Shell is we would like for everyone to be able to bring their whole selves to work and to be able, in the same way that we talk about physical safety. In Shell, it is very important that everyone comes to work, they work safely so that they can go back home to their families. So we want for people to feel psychologically safe. Yeah, and that's the inclusion part. So that's my work.
Yeah, good. Yeah. You mentioned, obviously, in the West, I keep up with this debate quite a lot in the West. There's a movement that suggests men and women are exactly the same. Gender is, or the difference between the sexes isn't that much. But a lot of your work at Shell was actually based on some research that definitely suggests that men and women work in different ways. So obviously that would be quite controversial to someone who says that men and women are exactly the same. So maybe you could tell us how do women work differently to men, and how are you making sure that you build a company that empowers both sexes?
Okay, maybe it's just some context. So when we started a much more global focus around diversity and inclusion, what we wanted to do was to find out why we had so few women at every level, especially at the senior level. We had then collaborated with external researchers, with institutions, and one of the earlier work and support that we had was around this piece of work called Invisible Rules, Men, Women, and Teams. And it highlights, so let me put it this way, right? Men and women do work differently. We have been socialized differently. And as Cindy has mentioned, we have some societal expectations that have been placed on us as we've grown up. And that leads to inequalities or different ways of thinking when we get to work. And with where we are today, in oil and gas, where there are predominantly more men in senior positions, just because there are fewer women who go into STEM type of roles, it means that then the rules of play in the organization are set with a male mindset. Yeah, so what we need to do is to ensure that there's understanding around how women work and how women play. And not just for the men, but for the women to realize that if they're told, you're too aggressive. When you're in a meeting, you should not be so aggressive. You should not be so emotional. You have to be like the men. So what type of message is that? Yeah, so, but it's around, making sure that everyone can bring their strengths. So that was the earlier work. Yeah, but I think today, where we are right now is focusing much more around the practices. So as an example, what we have noticed as well is that there is what we call a cliff effect. So in Shell, we bring in equal numbers of graduates, 50% women, 50% men, right? So if you think about the fact that, it's unequal, it's not, right? But what we notice is that at mid-career, there seem to be more women who will drop out, or who will slow down in their career. And it's quite a steep cliff, and that's why we call it a cliff. So we did some focus groups, some deep discussions, and what we find out is that women start to make decisions. I mean, everyone does, right? But at mid-career, you start to make decisions, and that could include starting families. And especially in Asia, again, there are some societal expectations about what that means when you start families. So globally, one of the support, 2 years ago, we wrote out a global minimum standard for maternity leave, and that's right across 70 over countries, and it's 16 weeks of paid leave. And there are about 45 countries before we implemented this that did not have 16 weeks. So that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Good stuff. Now, if we're getting 50-50 women and men in the workforce, hopefully we'll be paying them the same. So let's talk about the pay gap. I mean, Cindy, we were having a back and forth about this before. I've read somewhere that your industry, fashion, modelling, obviously specifically, might be one of the few jobs where women get paid more than men to do the same job. Obviously, you didn't quite agree, but how the pay gap in the fashion industry, and obviously with modelling, what's your experience of that? Was there one when you were?
I feel like it would be more related to the amount of women working in the fashion industry as opposed to men. It's just it's the nature of fashion, I think, is more geared for women. So there may be one of the very few industries that women earn more than men, but the majority of industries and work globally now, women still, I think it's around 77% of what men earn. But it's also not just the pay gap, it's labor constraints and how a woman is then challenged when she has to juggle her work life, career, and family. And I think it comes down to companies like Shell being flexible, being able to support the women employees, and so that they can bring their full potential as well. So that's a lot.
Exactly 1 week ago, that women in Switzerland, they went on strike for one day over the pay gap, and obviously said that they're not going to work today because they're not paid the same as men. Obviously, different debates on what the pay gap is in ASEAN. Different countries obviously have different pay gaps. Do you think we'll ever get to the stage where, obviously we'll focus on Thailand, will Thai women ever come out on the street and say, we're not working today because we don't get paid the same as men? Do you think?
Why not? Maybe I'll start another hashtag.
Good stuff. And, JP, how's the pay gap at Shiseido?
No, I don't think there is a problem of pay gap. I think it's more a gap of how many women are in the important positions, which creates obviously a difference. So the more you give equal opportunities to women to go up, the more you will cancel what you call the pay gap. But we basically pay people according to their position primarily, and it's all about, I think, fairness when you work for a company, and how you show that to all the employees.
Definitely. Lynn, how's your pay gap?
I think the same as JP. So it's not that we pay men and women the same. So in terms of equal pay for equal work. But it's exactly that we do not have enough women in senior leadership roles. And in oil and gas as well, I mentioned that before, that we have too few women who are in STEM roles, so that's technical, engineering, math type of roles, and science, and that leads to the inequality in pay. But what we've done recently is then there's been so much focus on women, right, and the gender pay gap, to say we have to fix the gap, we have to fix the women, or at least it's perceived that way. There are a lot of women as well, do not want to be in the spotlight. But what we know as well from talking to our staff is that the men feel left out, and you feel like, wow, if there's another senior role, obviously it's not going to go to me, men. What we're focusing now is to make sure that we also empower the men so that the men can support the women, right? Because you need to start to change the dynamics of how people work and the dynamics of the family. So encouraging things like flexible working for men and women. We're looking now at minimum standards for paternity leave. We're exploring that around ensuring that men have the same rights so that they can spend time with family as well. Yeah, and also then making sure that we work with communities. So we have programs with engineering institutions, with universities. We have programs for young people. It's called N Explorers, where we really work with the young talents, young boys and girls, to have them to get interested in trying to solve, like complex issues around food, water, energy. And bring it much more into something that's exciting, something that involves everyone's future.
Good stuff. Maybe we'll wrap up all of you one after the other. Obviously focusing on ASEAN today. How do you think ASEAN is doing overall compared to the rest of the world, and how can we make sure that ASEAN there's a good standard to everyone with regards to gender equality, women's empowerment, everyone's on the same level playing field? How do you think we can get that?
I think there are a lot of things to do in ASEAN, obviously, and the level of each country is very different. As I mentioned, Thailand actually can be quite a good example in some ways, because I see a lot of women CEO in Thailand, and women takes an important part of some corporations here, so that could be a good example. On the other side, you have some emerging countries which are starting from nothing, like Cambodia, Myanmar, all these countries. There's so many things to do to help equalize, opportunities there, and it starts, I think, from education. As you mentioned before, I think there's a lot of opportunities, even from corporations who want to do a social cause and do a good contribution to ASEAN. I think there's a lot of opportunities here.
And Cindy, with your campaign going into other countries, the other countries looking to Thailand and saying, Thailand's leading the way, or how are you finding the region?
I feel like the whole agenda of gender equality, just to bounce off what JP was mentioning, about offering equal opportunities for women in leadership, whether it be politics, in economic, in private and public life. So that means, access to technology, access to education, land ownership. So all of these things, I feel like ASEAN is in a very good position to start to provide that and also be much more supportive and proactive in this area. But specifically, again, it goes back to education for me. In fact, next week we'll be launching, UNESCO is launching a comprehensive guideline to sexuality education, which hopefully will be a guideline for all countries, specifically in ASEAN, to be providing children with comprehensive sexuality education from as young as 5 years old in the homes and across the education curriculum. So Thailand, as the chair of ASEAN, is in a very unique position to lead the way with this, and I really hope that we're able to do that.
Good stuff. And Lynn, obviously your role's global.
Yes.
How's ASEAN doing compared to the rest of the world?
Well, I think I had thought about this, and I think to agree that ASEAN first is primed in terms of actually accelerating and actually being an example. So in Shell, what's interesting is that we have 9 country chairperson roles. So this would be the senior country person, representative in Shell. And of that 9, 6 of these are women based in Asia. And in quite unconventional places like Korea, Japan, Brunei, Vietnam, Singapore as well, right? And so I think perhaps it's around harnessing the power and making it possible. What would be perceived as impossible is actually possible, and that women and men in ASEAN and in Asia are actually, ready for change and ready to move. And I think we really just need to harness that energy and move forward.
Great way to wrap up, Lynn. And ASEAN's ready for change. Obviously, still got some hurdles to overcome, but with the hard work of Cindy, JP, and Lynn, we're definitely heading in the right direction. So thanks for your time, and look forward to the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.